Alright. So my wins, I got 560 wins, right? 281 losses and 4 losses. My highest win streak. My win loss has to drop. Let me see yours.
Where you at?
Go to Fat Records
Where?
for Barracks and Lorax and go yeah, that. Sleepyhead.
Oh, these smokes on sniping, bro. Oh, hell yeah, frost.
Straight to the middle. This nigga wants to run in front of me.
Hostiles have captured the hardpoint. Hardpoint locked down. Taking control. Hardpoint contested.
Man, that was mad loud.
Hardpoint contested.
We got to that spawn. To the next round.
I've been trying, we got one dude not playing, that's why we spawned back there.
We've lost the hardpoint. Hardpoint locked down. Contesting hardpoint. Hardpoint lost.
Alright. They're camping in the back of this spawn.
Throwing something. Hardpoint locked down. Hardpoint located. Hostiles have captured the hardpoint. Throwing something. Hardpoint locked down.
Get the fuck out of here, thank you.
Man, these camping niggas in the building.
Hostiles pipeline established overhead. Deploying his pipeline contacts. We've lost the hardpoint contested. We've lost the hardpoint. Hardpoint locked down.
Alright.
Hardpoint lost.
What the fuck? Whoa!
Enemy spy plane.
Sentry turret ready to deploy.
Hardpoint identified. Secure. Hardpoint locked down. Contesting hardpoint. Hardpoint lost. Hardpoint locked down. Hostile spy plane established overhead. We've lost the hardpoint.
Oh, that saved you. Okay.
Throwing semtex. Next up. Hardpoint identified. Contesting hardpoint. We've lost the hardpoint.
Take this once. Okay. Fuck.
Enemy hub established above. Hardpoint taken. Throwing semtex. Hardpoint locked down. Enemy napalm strike incoming. Hardpoint lost. Next up. Hardpoint is secure. Either napalm strike inbound. Hardpoint lost. Hardpoint identified. Hardpoint locked down. We're in the lead. Enemy spy plane inbound. Throwing semtex. Contesting hardpoint. Hardpoint contested. Multiple enemy spy plane contacts. Contesting hardpoint. Hostile care package inbound. Hardpoint identified. Hostiles have hardpoint. Hardpoint locked down. Hostile artillery targeting active.
Oh, of course. Okay, that shit.
Throwing semtex.
Thank you, bro. You saved my ass.
Contesting hardpoint. Hostile gun patrol detected. Hardpoint located. Hardpoint locked down. Hardpoint locked down. They're dead. Loyalty to the party, loyalty to the motherland. Victory.
I was just fucking them up with the RPG.
All hostiles eliminated.
I'm done.
Nice job, fat guy.
Got
No way you take me down. Enemy spy plane inbound. Sniper working. Confirming map down.
Awaiting orders.
Oh, did that.
Confirming kill. Hostile spy plane established overhead. EKIA. We're taking control. Friendly target here. We've lost the lead. This isn't working. We're behind.
Oh, fuck.
Artillery targeting detected. We're in the lead. We've fallen behind. Enemy spy plane inbound. This isn't working. We're behind. We're losing this fight. Wasted him. This isn't how we drilled it. Pull it back. Enemy coming.
That's how you feel about it, buddy?
Mission is futile. Survive to make for exfil.
So gangsta.
Pretty nice with that casino, are you?
It's still lost. Yep.
Right, guys, you know what they say. Go hard or go home. And if you're already home, go hard or leave it alone.
Contesting hardpoint. Hardpoint lost. Hardpoint locked down. Semtex grenade. Hardpoint lost. Hardpoint located. Hostiles have captured the hardpoint. This isn't working. We're behind. Semtex grenade. Established overhead. Pulse grenade inbound. Hardpoint locked down. Hardpoint lost. point is secure. Contested. We've pulled ahead. Contesting hardpoint. Enemy spotlight inbound. We're losing the advantage. Multiple enemy spy plane contact. Hardpoint located. Hardpoint locked down. Hardpoint lost.
Sensex grenade.
We've lost the lead. Sit rep. They both lost the hardpoint contested. Hardpoint lost. They both strike inbound. Enemy spy plane inbound. Multiple hostile spy planes. Capture the hardpoint.
They're dead.
Spy plane established overhead. Hardpoint locked down. Hardpoint located. Enemy care package above. Hardpoint locked down. Hardpoint locked down. We've lost the hardpoint. plane contacts. Hostiles have captured the harbor. Hostile spy plane established overhead. Artillery targeting detected. Net call. Incoming artillery. Strike inbound. We're losing the advantage. Enemy spy plane inbound. We've lost the hard point. Hardpoint located. Hardpoint contested. Hardpoint contested. Hardpoint lost. Enemy napalm strike incoming.
Subject.
Enact CASEVAC protocols. Better we live to fight another day.
Shit's going sideways. Time to go.
5:55 a.m. Right now in Syracuse, it's 51 degrees and clear. Today, it'll be mostly sunny, with a forecasted high of 67 and a low of 50.
Pull it together. We can still take this.
Currently in Syracuse, it's 53 degrees and clear. Today, it'll be mostly sunny, with a forecasted high of 68 and a low of 51. Right now in Syracuse, it's 53 degrees and clear. Today, it'll be mostly sunny, with a forecasted high of 68 and a low of 51. Have a nice day. Here's the latest news.
Halftime.
From Reuters TV, U.S. at 5:32 a.m. today. Here are your top stories brought to you by Fidelity Wealth Management.
The migrant crisis at the U.S. southern border sparks a dramatic resignation.
Texas abortion providers are lobbying the U.S. Supreme Court.
Switching rally points.
A CDC panel voted Thursday to recommend booster shots of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine to people ages 65 and older and those at risk for severe disease. The vote clears the way for a rollout to begin as early as this week. The booster shots were authorized by the FDA on Wednesday. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Advisory Panel declined to recommend boosters for adults ages 18 to 64 who live or work in institutions with high risk of contracting COVID-19, such as healthcare workers, teachers, and residents of homeless shelters and prisons. Some panel members cited the difficulty of implementing such a proposal. The CDC said that some 26 million people in the United States received the second Pfizer shot at least 6 months ago, including 13 million aged 65 or older.
Support for Reuters comes from Fidelity Wealth Management. Get help creating a comprehensive plan for your full financial picture from a dedicated Fidelity advisor. Learn more at fidelity.com/wealth. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
The migrant crisis at the U.S. southern border sparked a dramatic diplomatic rebuke on Thursday as the U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti resigned in protest to what he called the inhumane treatment of thousands of Haitian refugees. In a blistering letter to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, diplomat Daniel Foote said, quote, "I will not be associated with the United States' inhumane, counterproductive decision to deport thousands of Haitian refugees and illegal immigrants." Haiti, the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, has gone through profound instability in recent weeks, including a presidential assassination, gang violence, and a major earthquake. With 7 Caribbean nations, the collapse of the state was unable to support the infusion of returning migrants. Many Haitians see refuge in the U.S. as a way to help those back home.
There is a crisis going on in our country. We shouldn't be deported because the people who are being deported are people who send food to their families, to their friends.
U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price called Foote's resignation unfortunate and said he has, quote, mischaracterized the circumstances. Foote's departure follows growing pressure on the Biden administration from the United Nations and his fellow Democrats over the treatment of Haitians in a sprawling, impromptu migrant camp in Texas near the Mexican border. Democrats had hoped to put an end to deterrent measures brought in by Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump. On the Mexican side of the river early on Thursday, close to 20 police patrol cars lined the bank, looking at the area where hundreds of Haitian migrants in recent days have crossed back and forth. Many said they were awoken at 6 a.m. by the cars driving through the camp and, fearful of being detained, chose to cross back to the U.S. side. As many as 14,000 people gathered in the camp in Del Rio, Texas last week. Less than half remain due to expulsions and detentions, while others have left for Mexico to avoid being sent home.
Abortion providers in Texas have urged the U.S. Supreme Court to intervene in their challenge to a near-total ban on abortion in the state. On Thursday, abortion providers filed a petition asking the Supreme Court to hear their case before lower courts finish their ruling on the law, which bans abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy before many women realize they're pregnant. This month, the conservative-majority Supreme Court refused to block the measure, which allows private citizens to sue anyone who assists a woman in getting an abortion past the 6-week cutoff. That unusual
CNN news briefing at 11:04 p.m. yesterday.
CNN 5 Things, sponsored by Harsh.
Hello from CNN. I'm Afoma Dike with the 5 things you need to know for Thursday, September 23rd. Brian Laundrie has been formally charged with a federal crime for his activities following Jesse Steele's death, according to FBI Denver. According to the federal indictment, Laundrie used a debit card and a PIN number linked to accounts that didn't belong to him and charged more than $1,000 between August 30th and September 1st. Northport police say they will continue their search for Laundrie Friday at a Florida nature reserve. Petito's remains were found at a national forest in Wyoming, and her death was ruled a homicide. The Select Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol insurrection has subpoenaed 4 former Trump White House staffers. The subpoenas target former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, former Deputy Chief of Staff Dan Scavino, former White House advisor Steve Bannon, and Kash Patel, a former Chief of Staff to then Acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller. The subpoenas are for private depositions and records. They've been requested to appear before the panel next month. Police say at least 1 person was killed and 14 others injured in a shooting at a Kroger in Collierville, Tennessee Thursday. The city's police chief, Dale Lane, says the shooter was found dead, apparently of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Kroger employee Regina Dickerson said she was working the cash register when she said the shooting began in the deli section. Here's how she described the scene inside the store.
So we ran to the back of the store. I said, go. Came in there where I was, where all the other people were. He shot one in the head, shot one of my coworkers in the head, and then he shot a customer in the stomach.
The police chief says several employees were hiding in freezers or locked offices when officers arrived. He said the shooter's vehicle was in the parking lot and was being searched. Police in Canada are looking for a man they say punched a nurse in the face multiple times after she gave his wife a COVID-19 vaccine without his permission. A police spokesman told CNN that a man entered a pharmacy in Sherbrooke, a city in southern Quebec, and accused the nurse of vaccinating his wife. The spokesman says the nurse didn't have time to defend or explain herself before the man knocked her to the ground. There are no laws in Canada requiring spousal consent for vaccinations, and it is unclear if his wife had given consent. The nurse was taken to the hospital and treated for facial injuries.
The tablet is a treasure to the world, and it will now return to its home.
That's Stacey White from the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs during a Smithsonian Institution repatriation ceremony in Washington, D.C. Thursday. She's talking about the Gilgamesh Dream Tablet, an ancient artifact purchased by craft store Hobby Lobby that has now been formally returned to Iraq. The Justice Department deemed that the clay tablet entered the United States contrary to federal law. The artifact is inscribed with a portion of Gilgamesh, an epic poem considered one of the world's oldest works of literature. Hobby Lobby bought the tablet at an auction house in 2014 for more than $1.6 million. The president of the company wanted it displayed at a museum where he's the chairman. The DOJ says the auction house withheld information and lied about its origins. Law enforcement agents seized the tablet from the museum in 2019. That's all for now. We'll be back at 6 a.m. Eastern Time with the latest headlines whenever you want them and wherever you are.
CNN 5 Things makes it easy to get the day's headlines all in one place. Indeed can make your hiring process just as simple. In fact, the moment you post a sponsored job, Indeed Instant Match provides a list of quality candidates for you to consider. Get started right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/CNN. That's Indeed.com/CNN. Offer valid through September 30th. Terms and conditions apply.
From CNBC Tech Check at 6:22 p.m. yesterday. CNBC's Tech Check is sponsored by Grayscale, the world's largest digital currency asset manager.
I'm Kate Rooney, and here's your CNBC Tech Check briefing. Twitter will now allow users to tip their favorite creators on the social network using Bitcoin.
The company announced today that its tips feature will roll out globally to all Apple iOS users this week and will become available for Android users in the coming weeks. Previously, users could tip with more traditional payment services such as Square's Cash App and PayPal's Venmo. Twitter does not take a cut of any money through its tips. Meanwhile, shares of Salesforce rising 6% after the cloud software company boosted its revenue forecast for the current fiscal year and provided an outlook for its next year that exceeded analyst estimates. Salesforce saying in a statement that revenue will be as high as $26.3 billion. The CFO, Amy Weaver, says the company is getting more efficient thanks in part to Slack. The stock is up 24% this year. And Airbnb says it's planning to provide temporary housing to an additional 20,000 Afghan refugees, bringing the total number up to 40,000. In a new blog post, Airbnb says that it will have, quote, the capacity to go above and beyond its initial commitment. Airbnb has not specified exactly how much the company plans to spend on the commitment or how long the refugees are being housed for. And that's it from the West Coast. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
From Bloomberg First Word at 1:44 a.m. today. The U.S. is considering forcing companies in the semiconductor supply chain to provide information on inventory and sales of chips. The administration could do this by invoking a Cold War-era national security law. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo says the goal is to alleviate bottlenecks and to identify possible hoarding. BP is temporarily shutting some of its UK petrol stations as a truck driver shortage affects fuel deliveries. Google said a small number of its Tesco-branded sites have also been affected. The UK's exit from the EU has constrained the flow of workers from the continent amid a tight labour market. Supermarket deliveries have also been impacted. The US is set to begin giving COVID-19 booster shots to millions of Americans starting as soon as today. On Thursday, a panel of experts advising the CDC recommended boosters for over 65s to receive the Pfizer jab and for younger people with underlying medical conditions. However, they did not recommend them for staff in high-risk occupations, putting them at odds with the FDA. India's long-delayed plans to overhaul its military are getting a new life. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government is integrating the Army, Air Force and Navy in the biggest reorganisation of its military since independence. India is also moving closer to the US and its allies, which is strengthening defence cooperation against China. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg. From DW News Brief at 1 a.m. today.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. Germany's candidate to succeed Angela Merkel faced off for the last time ahead of Sunday's election in a TV debate clashing on tax, debt and foreign policy. A post-debate poll showed Social Democrat candidate Olaf Scholz clinging to his lead, with the CDU candidate Armin Laschet and Green candidate Annalena Baerbock both making slight gains. The World Health Organization has called on international donors to resume funding of Afghanistan's healthcare program amid fears of a humanitarian crisis. They say the already fragile healthcare system is overwhelmed, with hundreds of thousands of vulnerable Afghans deprived of access to care. International funding has been suspended since the Taliban seized control. The EU has unveiled plans that would require manufacturers to adopt a standard charging method for mobile phones, tablets, headphones and other portable devices. Brussels believes the move would cut back on electronic waste. Apple, which makes one of the charging systems in use, is expected to fight this plan. This is DW News. You'll find more information on our website at dw.com.
From New York Times, The Daily at 5:50 a.m. today. Home care services are needed now more than ever. 10,000 people in America turn 65 every day, and the number of adults 65 and older will double in a few decades. Home care workers help seniors and people with disabilities live with dignity, but these jobs are underpaid, paying a median annual income of $18,100. It's time for Congress to invest in home care jobs and services for American families by passing the Build Back Better plan. Text daily to 787753 to show your support.
From the New York Times, I'm Michael Powellsr. This weekend, Germans head to the polls to elect a new chancellor and to answer the question of what Germany and the rest of Europe should look like after 16 years of Angela Merkel. I spoke to my colleague, Berlin Bureau Chief Katrin Benedict. It's Friday, September 24th. Katrin, describe what exactly is at stake in this weekend's election in Germany.
This is an incredibly unusual election. We've had the same chancellor for 16 years, Angela Merkel, who's basically been not just the leader of Germany, but also the leader of Europe. And in this time, she's guided Germany and the continent through all these crises, one after another, and given people kind of this feeling of stability throughout. And so, yeah, in many ways it feels not just the future of Germany is at stake here, but actually the future of Europe as well.
Also, given that, what is the defining question in the campaign to replace her?
I mean, the incredible thing is that after 16 years in power, she's walking out of office as the most popular politician in the country. Germans are pretty contented with the way that things have been under Angela Merkel, and a lot of people are feeling anxious about this change at the helm, which has given them the stability. And so they're looking at the people who are trying to replace her with that in mind. In a way, the question becomes, who can do what she did for us in the last 16 years, in the years to come?
Well, let's talk about what she has done and what exactly, after 16 years, Merkelism looks like in Germany. So what is this work of Angela Merkel?
So Merkel grew up behind the Iron Curtain in the former communist East of Germany. But her father was a Lutheran pastor, and in that sense, she grew up in a very different household from the majority of households in the communist East. You know, religion was something that was tolerated, but really not appreciated under communism. So she was sort of used to living in a household that was different from others. And there was some degree of freedom in terms of political debate at home, but she was very aware that outside of her home, dissent was not acceptable. And so when she described this time to a German newspaper later, she said, for 35 years, I experienced the official opinion as different from my own. I was alone with my opinion, or shared it with very few people. She said, that's why it does not bother me when others see things differently.
So what she's saying is that growing up in a communist society where she couldn't express herself, she became comfortable with the idea that she could harbor strong views of her own even if they were at odds with the official line.
To me, it's almost like she grew up in a situation where her own views and values were at odds with the regime. And it forced her to kind of understand where her values lied. It sharpened her sense of what is right and what is wrong. And that moral clarity is something that we see over and over again when she's a leader later on.
Tell me what you mean. When do we start to see her moral clarity when she enters politics in Germany?
So Merkel pretty much enters politics right after the Berlin Wall falls.
What?
And she rises through the ranks of the Christian Democratic Party, which is the center-right party in Germany, of the most powerful man in Germany at the time, Helmut Kohl, the chancellor. And she becomes known as Kohl's girl, and lands a number of ministerial posts, you know, is pretty successful throughout the 1990s. But then towards the end of the decade, it emerges that the party had these secret accounts where campaign donations would be collected, and there was absolutely no accounting, and the only person that seemed to know what this was all about was Helmut Kohl himself. It was a huge scandal, and so Merkel before Christmas in 1999, wrote this bombshell letter to a newspaper in which she publicly asked her party to oust Kohl,
Her mentor.
her mentor, the man who had basically turned her into what she was. And it was kind of the first time when there was not just moral clarity, but there was also a clear political ambition that came into view here. And you know, that ambition ultimately takes her to the heart of German politics.
Herr Präsident, ich nehme die Wahl an.
When in 2005 she becomes the first woman and the first Easterner to become chancellor.
Firstly, I feel good.
Jetzt gut. Erstmal. Zweitens,
Secondly, I think it's going to work.
And that's really when you begin to see her ability to do things that are potentially unpopular, but that feel right to her. That you see that play out, particularly in these two crucial moments of crisis that define her time in office.
And what are those crucial moments?
So the first big crisis that hit in her chancellorship was basically
the French and German leaders are meeting in Paris, trying yet again to contain the debt crisis that's threatening the Eurozone.
The European debt crisis, which came from the sort of aftermath of the Lehman Brothers collapse in the United States, a financial crisis that swept across the Atlantic, infected financial systems, and eventually led several southern European countries to kind of the verge of bankruptcy. And Greece was the main one.
The big fear is that if Greece can't raise the money to finance its deficit, then other countries that use the euro could be dragged down too.
There was a point at which it looked like it had to leave the Eurozone.
The Eurozone badly needs fixing, and Germany has been the main country applying the sticking plaster.
And Merkel, as the leader of the biggest economy in Europe, and in the Eurozone, which shares this common currency, is in a situation where she basically has to decide, do we cut this country loose effectively by not bailing them out, or do we help? And it was politically a very difficult situation because Germans at home weren't in any mood to subsidize Greeks who were seen as having not been very disciplined. At the same time, Merkel knew that if the euro fails, the whole European project was basically at risk. And so it was in 2010 that she uttered this famous sentence when she said,
Denn scheitert der Euro, dann scheitert Europa.
Scheitert der Euro, dann scheitert Europa. If the euro fails, Europe fails. And that was the moment when she basically committed. She would save Greece and she would save the Eurozone. But the bailout that she helped mastermind at the time came with a lot of strings attached. And there were a lot of austerity measures that had to be swallowed by these southern European countries like Greece. And they were experienced very negatively because these austerity measures were incredibly painful.
And so what did we learn about Merkel from this crisis?
I think what you see there is that when she knows what she thinks the right thing to do is, she will do it. And she will do it even if it's unpopular. And this bailout was unpopular on both sides of the fence. But she stood firm because in her mind, the priority was to save Europe.
So what is the second big crisis?
Europe is continuing to struggle with the flood of migrants from war-torn countries pouring into Europe by land and sea.
So in 2015, suddenly the numbers of asylum seekers starts building up in Europe.
You can see the tents lined up right here behind me, and inside them, Syrian refugees escaping war.
You've got the war in Syria. You've got problems in Afghanistan.
80% of refugees now in Europe are from Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq.
And a sort of combination of crises lead to this massive exodus of people from the Middle East, then joined by various other groups from North Africa.
Tens of thousands of refugees running for their lives to Europe.
And it ends up in this sort of pivotal moment in the summer of 2015, at which tens of thousands of people were literally trying to enter Europe every day.
For the last couple of weeks, there has been a refugee crisis on this with 20,000 refugees effectively trapped here and unable to get
And you had these images at the time of just masses of people in limbo, not being able to move, and in appalling conditions too. We need the help, we need the dress, we need the food. And the question that was asked at the time was, who will take these people in? And, in the midst of this chaos.
Ich möchte mich bedanken für die Einladung der Bundespressekonferenz, Frau Welti, und
Angela Merkel basically stood up in front of her country and said,
wir haben so vieles geschafft, wir schaffen das.
Wir schaffen das.
Wir schaffen das, und wo uns etwas im Wege steht, muss es überholt
werden. We can do this. We will manage. And she placed this crisis in the context of the great arc of post-war German history. She said, we've done great things before. We've managed other challenges. We rebuilt after World War II. We reunified East and West. We can do this too. And I remember the day that she pretty much gave the go-ahead. I was at the train station in Munich, watching these trains of refugees roll in, the Syrians step out, and Germans lining those platforms, clapping as they arrived, handing soft toys to children, and welcoming these refugees to Germany. This is the country that committed the Holocaust. It's the country with the ugly past. This is the right thing. And it was a moment of pride, really, for a country that hadn't really been allowed to be proud up to that point. And in total, that year and the next, Germany would take in over 1 million refugees. Wow. So it was this really important moment in sort of German post-war history, but it also prompted a huge backlash. And it meant that for the first time since World War II, a far-right party actually made it to the German parliament. That party was on a roll. There was a sense at one point that Angela Merkel, might actually have to end her career early. But it wasn't the case. And in the end, here she is, the most popular politician in the country. And if you think about it, she kind of showed that you don't have to be a martyr. You don't have to be voted out of office when you've done the right thing. And that's really why this election on Sunday matters so much. Because the question is, who will fill that huge vacuum she leaves? Who can be the leader of Germany, the leader of Europe, at a time when the world certainly faces no fewer crises? We'll be right back.
Home care services are needed now more than ever. 10,000 people in America turn 65 every day, and the number of adults 65 and older will double in a few decades. Home care workers help seniors and people with disabilities live with dignity, but these jobs are underpaid, paying a median annual income of $18,100. It's time for Congress to invest in home care jobs and services for American families by passing the Build Back Better plan. Text daily to 787753 to show your support.
Hey, Daily listeners, it's Jacob, host of The Argument, a podcast from New York Times Opinion. I've spent years as a reporter talking to people from across the political spectrum. I've heard a lot of arguments, too, in person and online. Some are baseless and mean, but some have made me think differently, or helped me understand other people's points of view. And that's what The Argument is about. Each week on the show, you'll hear people who disagree with each other. Respectful civil debate that gets behind the big news stories and beyond party lines. Like how to reform policing in America, whether we should cancel student debt, raise the minimum wage, or kill the filibuster. You might not agree with everything you hear, and that's the point. You might even walk away with some new opinions of your own. You can listen to new episodes of The Argument every Wednesday, wherever you're listening to this podcast.
So let's talk about the candidacy for police Merkel and how they do or don't relate to her, given just how large she is right now.
So there are basically three people who'd like to become the new chancellor. Two guys who kind of lean into Merkel, and one woman who's more leaning away. And the thing to know is that, Germany is not a presidential system. You don't really vote for people, you vote for parties. The number of votes that goes to a party determines the share of seats in Parliament that party gets. It's Parliament who votes for the new Chancellor.
Got it. So, who is the first of these three candidates? What do we need to know?
Liebe Freundinnen, Freunde.
So the first guy is this guy called Armin Laschet. He's from Merkel's own party, the Christian Democrats.
Ich danke Angela Merkel, der Bundeskanzlerin.
And he's this guy who sort of was considered to be kind of a safe pair of hands in Merkel's party. He's a longtime Merkel ally. He supported her during the migrant crisis. He's also the governor of Germany's biggest state, North Rhine-Westphalia. So he's somebody who's considered to have governing experience. But above all, he was the guy among the candidates they chose from who kind of seemed to look most like Merkel. Nothing too conspicuous, fairly calm, the candidate of continuity. But during the campaign, he made a bunch of blunders, and the worst moment came in the aftermath of those terrible floods. If you recall, we had this torrential rain in southwestern Germany over the summer. We had these terrible floods that killed over 180 people. And in the aftermath, at an event where some of these victims were commemorated, Laschet was caught on camera in the background, giggling.
Sieht man im Hintergrund diese Szene. Armin Laschet lacht.
And it seems so inappropriate, and it was something that certainly Merkel would never have been caught doing, that, you know, he just started pre-falling in the polls. In many ways, this election was his to lose, and that's exactly what he's doing right now.
Okay, so who is the second of these candidates?
So for the first time, the Green Party in Germany also nominated a candidate. The Green Party is the sort of progressive party of environmentalists with climate change really at the heart of their agenda. They'd never designated a candidate before because they never really seemed to have a chance, but this time, because they've consistently proved to be the second most popular party in the country for the last 2 years, they decided to give it a go. And they designated a young woman,
Vielen Dank.
40 years old, Annalena Baerbock.
Eine junge Generation. Und das, was Bettina erlebt hat, das erleben wir gemeinsam, die auf diesen Marktplätzen steht.
Who has positioned herself clearly as the kind of agent of change in this election. She has a very sort of bold program of huge investments to transition the German economy to a carbon neutral economy within the next couple of decades, and is very engaged in this race as the person who says, we're not going to do everything that Merkel did, we're going to do things differently because this country needs change. That's kind of her pitch.
In unserem Land steckt so viel mehr. Schlagen wir ein neues Kapitel auf, machen wir es gemeinsam. Herzlichen Dank.
So she is the candidate offering herself up as a departure from 16 years of Merkel.
Totally. And you know, there was a moment when she was first nominated by her party in April. The media just went crazy. I mean, she was on every cover of every magazine, every newspaper, and she shot up in the polls. There was a brief moment when she actually led the polls, and people thought, oh my God, this could be the next chancellor. We could have the second woman chancellor following the first, a 40-year-old woman. But then she started to make a bunch of mistakes.
1.
There was a plagiarism scandal that broke. She hastily produced this book, and there were bits that were not attributed correctly, and she got slammed for it in the press.
21,
there were accusations
4.
that she was padding her resume because she hadn't accurately labeled some of the sections, and to some people, some of the stuff may not seem like such a big deal. I mean, certainly not enough of a big deal to kind of end a campaign. But if you combine it with the fact that, you know, she's a very young candidate, she's only 40, and she has no track record of governing anywhere, then it becomes more serious because it sort of undermines trust in her, because there's nothing else really to judge her by. And when those floods hit, the floods that brought her flagship issue, the flagship issue of the Greens, climate change, really to the center of this election campaign, she was sort of unable to benefit from it.
Kill confirmed.
So, almost at the same time, during those floods, this third candidate kind of starts to manifest himself and rise in the polls.
And who is that?
get behind me, yo? What the fuck is that? Get your ass out of here. Und Schulz was.
But it's been a strategy that exists on election has been phenomenally successful.
Come on.
And pretty much
subtext.
All your asses back home, CIA.
Mission is FUBAR.
Germans would much rather.
Home care services are needed now more than ever. 10,000 people in America turn 65 every day, and the number of adults 65 and older will double in a few decades. Home care workers help seniors and people with disabilities live with dignity, but these jobs are underpaid.
Claire Tennisgetter, Paige Cowett, Michael Simon Johnson, Brad Fisher, Larissa Anderson, Chris Wood, Jessica Chung, Stella Tan, Alexandra Lee Young, Lisa Chow, Mark George, Luke Vanderpluke, MJ Davis Lynn, Austin Mitchell, Nina Potok, Dan Powell, Dave Shaw, Sydney Harper, Daniel Guimet, Robert Jimison, Michael Benoit, Liz O'Bailey, Asta Chaturvedi, Caitlin Roberts, Rochelle Bonjo, Diana Wynn, Marion Lozano, Soraya Shockley, Corey Shrimple, Anita Badajo, Rob Zipko, Alicia Itu, Chelsea Daniel, and Mooj Sadie. Our theme music is by Jim Grunberg and Ben Lansford of Wonderly. Special thanks to Sam Dolnick, Paula Schumann, Theo Malcolm, Cliff Levy, Lauren Jackson, Julia Simon, Mahima Chulani, Sophia Mahan, Des Ibuqua, Erica Futterman, Wendy Dorr, Elizabeth Davis Moore, and Maddie Masiello. That's it for the Daily. I'm Michael Pawellsr. See you on Monday.
Home care services are needed now more than ever. 10,000 people in America turn 65 every day, and the number of adults 65 and older will double in a few decades. Home care workers help seniors and people with disabilities live with dignity, but these jobs are underpaid, paying a median annual income of $18,100. It's time for Congress to invest in home care jobs and services for American families by passing the Build Back Better plan. Text DAILY to 787753 to show your support.
Enemy took B.
One by. Positive on Semtex. Italian Semtex.
Losing Bravo. Hostile spy plane established overhead. Multiple hostile spy planes detected.
Assaulting spot. Arming Semtex. Semtex prime.
Losing B. We lost B. Enemy spy plane inbound. Turn this around. Halftime. Switching sides. Capture the objective. Securing Charlie. Charlie secure. Enemy took A. Enemy has B. Taking B.
Hostile down. EKIA.
What?
Throwing Semtex.
Taking Bravo. Losing B. Enemy napalm strike incoming.
Positive on Semtex.
Losing B.
Semtex prime.
Hostile attack helicopter inbound. Hostile artillery targeting active. Enemy spy plane inbound. Losing B. Losing B. Victory's close. Great job, CIA. No muss, no fuss.
The oppresso lever, baby.
captured the hard point.
He's down.
Hardpoint is secure. Enemy RCXD detected. Hardpoint identified. Hardpoint locked down. Enemy spy plane inbound. Hostiles have a hardpoint. Hardpoint locked down. Contesting hardpoint. Hostile spy plane established overhead.
Hi, on Messenger. It's 7 a.m. Right now in Syracuse, it's 51 degrees and sunny. Today, it'll be partly cloudy, with a forecasted high of 68 and a low of 50. Currently in Syracuse, it's 51 degrees and sunny. Today, it'll be partly cloudy, with a forecasted high of 68 and a low of 50. On the 25th in Syracuse, it'll be partly cloudy, with a high of 74 and a low of 52.
Hostile artillery targeting active.
Have a wonderful day.
Net call. Incoming
Here's the
artillery.
latest news. From Reuters TV, U.S. at 6:32 a.m. today. Here are your top stories brought to you by Fidelity Wealth Management.
The migrant crisis at the U.S. southern border sparks a dramatic resignation.
A CDC panel voted Thursday to recommend booster shots of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine to people ages 65 and older and those at risk for severe disease. The vote clears the way for a rollout to begin as early as this week. The booster shots were authorized by the FDA on Wednesday. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Advisory Panel declined to recommend boosters for adults ages 18 to 64 who live or work in institutions with high risk of contracting COVID-19, such as healthcare workers, teachers, and residents of homeless shelters and prisons. Some panel members cited the difficulty of implementing such a proposal. The CDC said that some 26 million people in the United States received the second Pfizer shot at least 6 months ago, including 13 million aged 65 or older.
Support for Reuters comes from Fidelity Wealth Management. Get help creating a comprehensive plan for your full financial picture from a dedicated Fidelity advisor. Learn more at fidelity.com/wealth. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
The migrant crisis at the U.S. southern border sparked a dramatic diplomatic rebuke on Thursday as the U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti resigned in protest to what he called the inhumane treatment of thousands of Haitian refugees. In a blistering letter to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, diplomat Daniel Foote said, quote, "I will not be associated with the United States' inhumane, counterproductive decision to deport thousands of Haitian refugees and illegal immigrants." Haiti, the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere has gone through profound instability in recent weeks, including a presidential assassination, gang violence, and a major earthquake. Foote said the Caribbean nation's collapsed state was unable to support the infusion of returning migrants. Many Haitians at the border see refuge in the U.S. as a way to help those back home.
There is a crisis going on in our country. We shouldn't be deported because the people who are being deported are people who send food to their families and to their friends.
U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price called Foote's resignation unfortunate and said he has, quote, mischaracterized circumstances. Foote's departure follows growing pressure on the Biden administration from the United Nations and his fellow Democrats over the treatment of Haitians in a sprawling, impromptu migrant camp in Texas near the Mexican border. Democrats had hoped for an end to deterrent measures brought in by Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump. On the Mexican side of the river early on Thursday, close to 20 police patrol cars lined the bank, overlooking the area where hundreds of Haitian migrants in recent days have crossed back and forth. Many said they were awoken at 6 a.m. by the cars driving through the camp and, fearful of being detained, chose to cross back to the U.S. side. As many as 14,000 people gathered at the camp in Del Rio, Texas last week. Less than half remain due to expulsions and detentions, while others have left for Mexico to avoid being sent home.
Those were your top stories for today, brought to you by Fidelity Wealth Management. From CNN News Briefing at 5:34 a.m. today.
This podcast is brought to you by Indeed.com.
Hello, from CNN, I'm Bez Jamil with the 5 things you need to know for Friday, September 24th. After days of lengthy debate among vaccine experts, the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine booster shots can now be officially given to some adults in the U.S. Early this morning, CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky diverged from the agency's independent vaccine advisors to recommend boosters for a broader group of people. Walensky said in a statement, quote, in a pandemic, even with uncertainty, we must take actions that we anticipate will do the greatest good. The group includes those aged 18 to 64 who are at increased risk of COVID-19 because of where they work or their institutional settings. That's as well as adults over the age of 65, long-term care facility residents, and some people with underlying health conditions. This aligns with the FDA, which gave its emergency authorization for the booster shots on Wednesday. Taiwan is calling China a bully after Beijing sent 24 warplanes into its air defense identification zone on Thursday. It's the third largest incursion in the past 2 years. CNN's Will Ripley explains.
Taiwan says that 24 Chinese fighter jets, bombers, and other military aircraft entered Taiwan's ADIZ, which is essentially a buffer zone between the island's sovereign airspace, which extends 12 nautical miles from its coast, and international airspace. Beijing is not violating international law here. What they are doing, Taipei says, is bullying and intimidating this self-governing island of 23 million people. And Taipei says it's no coincidence that this latest act of military intimidation comes just one day after Taiwan applied to join a major Pacific trade agreement that China is also trying to be a part of.
China's foreign ministry said it firmly opposes Taiwan's accession to any agreement or organization of an official nature. Police in the United Kingdom have arrested a 38-year-old man on suspicion of murdering a school teacher. Sabina Nessa was killed last Friday in southeast London. Police believe she was making a 5-minute walk from her house to a local pub to meet her friend. In a statement, Metropolitan Police said the suspect had been arrested in Lewisham and remains in custody. Police have also released a picture of another man they're looking for in connection with the murder. This all comes just 6 months after the assault and murder of Sarah Everard by a man who was a police officer, and has sparked renewed outcry about the UK's epidemic of violence against women and girls. The U.S. House of Representatives has approved $1 billion in funding for Israel's Iron Dome defense system. The bill passed easily and now goes to the Senate, where it's unclear when it will get a vote. 8 Democrats and 1 Republican voted against the bill. To appease a group of progressive Democrats, the bill was removed from another, intended to prevent a government shutdown and suspend the nation's borrowing limit. The Iron Dome is designed to intercept rockets mid-air by targeting them and firing interceptor missiles to destroy them. It was initially developed by Israel's defense technology company Rafael, but the system have human settlements, but exactly when that happened has often been debated by researchers. Now, researchers have used radiocarbon dating to study 61 footprints in New Mexico and found they were made around 21 to 23,000 years ago. The author of the study is an ancient footprint specialist, Professor Matthew Bennett. He says the people who made the footprints were mostly teenagers and children who were living in New Mexico at the height of the last ice age. You're up to date. We'll be back at 9 a.m. Eastern with the latest headlines whenever you want them and wherever you are.
It seems to happen like clockwork. As soon as a warranty runs out, things break and they're no longer covered. When your car is in that situation, though, you could be staring down thousands of dollars in repair bills. CarShield begins where your warranty ends with service plans that cover those expensive surprises. They pay your favorite mechanic or dealership directly, making the entire process fast and easy. Get a free quote by calling 800-416-6522 or visit carshield.com to get your free quote.
From CNBC Tech Check at 6:22 p.m. yesterday. CNBC's Tech Check is sponsored by Grayscale, the world's largest digital currency asset manager.
I'm Kate Rooney, and here's your CNBC Tech Check briefing. Twitter will now allow users to tip their favorite creators on the social network using Bitcoin. The company announced today that its tips feature will roll out globally to all Apple iOS users this week and will become available for Android users in the coming weeks. Previously, users could tip with more traditional payment services such as Square's Cash App and PayPal's Venmo. Twitter does not take a cut of any money through its tips feature. Meanwhile, shares of Salesforce rising 6% after the cloud software company boosted its revenue forecast for the current fiscal year and provided an outlook for its next year that exceeded analyst estimates. Salesforce saying in a statement that revenue will be as high as $26.35 billion. The CFO, Amy Weaver, says the company is getting more efficient thanks in part to Slack. The stock is up 24% this year. And Airbnb says it's planning to provide temporary housing to an additional 20,000 Afghan refugees, bringing the total number up to 40,000. In a new blog post, Airbnb said that it will have, quote, the capacity to go above and beyond its initial commitment. Airbnb has not specified exactly how much the company plans to spend on the commitment or how long the refugees are being housed for. And that's it from the West Coast. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
From Bloomberg First Word at 1:44 a.m. today. The U.S. is considering forcing companies in the semiconductor supply chain to provide information on inventory and sales of chips. The administration could do this by invoking a Cold War-era national security law. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo says the goal is to alleviate bottlenecks and to identify possible hoarding. BP is temporarily shutting some of its UK petrol stations as a truck driver shortage affects fuel deliveries. Mobil said a small number of its Tesco-branded sites have also been affected. The UK's exit from the EU has constrained the flow of workers from the continent amid a tight labour market. Supermarket deliveries have also been impacted. The US is set to begin giving COVID-19 booster shots to millions of Americans starting as soon as today. On Thursday, a panel of experts advising the CDC recommended boosters for over 65s who received the Pfizer jab and for younger people with underlying medical conditions. However, they did not recommend them for staff in high-risk occupations, putting them at odds with the FDA. India's long-delayed plans to overhaul its military are getting a new life. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government is integrating the Army, Air Force and Navy in the biggest reorganisation of its military since independence. India is also moving closer to the US and its allies, which is strengthening defence cooperation against China. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg. From DW News Brief at 1 a.m. today.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories.
Germany's candidates vying to succeed Angela Merkel faced off for the last time ahead of Sunday's election in a TV debate clashing on tax, debt and foreign policy. A post-debate poll showed Social Democrat candidate Olaf Scholz clinging to his lead, with the CDU candidate Armin Laschet and Green candidate Annalena Baerbock both making slight gains. The World Health Organization has called on international donors to resume funding of Afghanistan's healthcare program amid fears of a humanitarian crisis. They say the already fragile healthcare system is overwhelmed, with hundreds of thousands of vulnerable Afghans deprived of access to care. International funding has been suspended since the Taliban seized control. The EU has unveiled plans that would require manufacturers to adopt a standard charging method for mobile phones, tablets, headphones and other portable devices. Brussels believes the move would cut back on electronic waste. Apple, which makes one of the charging systems in use, is expected to fight this plan. This is DW News. You'll find more information on our website at dw.com.
What time did she think she was going to be ready by? Yeah, I was thinking about like 8:30. Oh yeah, because I'm not trying to be out there all day. You know what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure, because being that we're going to go to the fucking health center, I'm pretty sure, and they don't even got that many fucking chairs. There's only like 6 chairs in there. So you know what I'm saying? Like whoever the fuck don't got a seat, you gotta wait outside until the seat comes up. And that's how they was doing it a couple weeks ago when I was going to take my last test. They made people go outside. You tell them to be ready by 8:30.
Yeah, what's up?
Nothing. She still didn't call me back.
She didn't call you back.